little bit, but this week has looked a little different, hasn't it? You know, it's just a new time that we're in, and I want to start today's message by first off saying, man, I am so proud of our communities, of our cities, and just the way that you are responding in this time of crisis, the way that you are rallying to people when you know the needs of those around you, right? I mean, we've got schools finding way and making sure that students get lunch and breakfast, of like those who need it. I've heard stories of texts and phone calls and emails, FaceTime, just to like check in with each other and just make sure everybody is doing okay. If anyone needs anything, I've heard stories of people running to the grocery store and getting supplies and food that's, you know, for those who may be immunocompromised in order to help like protect the ones that we love. And I would love to invite you, like if you have witnessed or if you've been a part of anything going on like that in your city, I'd like for you to chat, throw that as a chat in the chat box there on the screen, because we would love to know about that and celebrate that with you, of just ways that we're rallying to each other during this time. And this time it's just been different. There's a lot of things that we're trying to understand. My second oldest daughter, or my second oldest, period, her name is KJ, and when she grows up, she is adamant right now, and she's been adamant for a long time. For a 4-year-old, that she wants to be a doctor when she grows up, and so she is super interested in anything medical. Right? Anytime we take the dog to the vet, she wants to go. Anytime we have to take one of our kids to the doctor, like she wants to go and ride along with, just because she's just so interested. And she's always got all these questions and intrigue. She loves science, and so. Because of how much has changed, our normal schedule and our normal routine, well, I mean, just like everybody, it's like, whoop, that's gone out the window. And there has been a lot of talk around why our schedule has changed. There's been a lot of talk about what we are going to do during the season and what we are not going to do during this season, which for our kids in general has led to a lot of questions. It's led to a lot of questions and talk about viruses and science and, who's at risk and how important it is to do our part of loving people by listening and staying, socially distanced and stuff. And KJ, she's loving it, right? She's loving like the medical talk and the virus talk and stuff. She's loving getting to learn about it. Now, our kids, much like your kids, I'm sure, if you have them, or you as a kid, one of their favorite things to do is to go to a fast food restaurant and play in a jungle gym. Now, I debated for a long time, what do you call those? Playhouses, jungle gyms, Throw it in the comments what you think these things are called. But my kids love to go to a fast food restaurant and run around in the jungle gym. The other night, our family, we got some good news in the midst of just the craziness going on and other not so good news. We got some good news, and so they're like, you know what? We're going to celebrate tonight. We're going to go get something. We're going to go get something to eat. And so we asked the kids what they wanted, and they wanted Chick-fil-A. So we all hopped in the van, and we drove to Chick-fil-A here in Macedonia. And my kids, their favorite play place right now, or jungle, whatever. I guess I sometimes call it play place, maybe. Their favorite place to go is Chick-fil-A. Now, Berkeley, who is my 2-year-old daughter, she loves to go in and play in this play place. And we get in there, and we're in through the drive-thru. We're obviously getting this as drive-thru to take home. And Berkeley, she begins to get upset because she realizes we're not going inside to play. And she's, she begins to get visibly upset about that. And KJ, 4-year-old, who sits right next to her, the medical, she begins to try and explain to Berkeley why we can't go inside. And Berkeley's just not getting it, and she's just getting frustrated. And KJ continues to try to explain, and Berkeley's just confused, and she begins to cry. And KJ, my 4-year-old, just as exasperated as a 4-year-old could be, went, she's just not getting this BIWIS thing. So don't worry. We don't have it figured out, but I have been emailing my congressman all week and trying to let him know that KJ has got this whole thing figured out, and so she'll get on it. But that's really it, isn't it? I mean, that's where the frustration comes in with all of this. That's where is all the confusion, the lack of clarity. That's where the fear comes in. It's because there's just so much we don't know right now. Right? Every day it seems to be like there are brand new waves of things that are closing and things that we need to do and things that we need to not do in order to help flatten the curve and protect the ones that we love. And we're more than willing, right? We're more than willing to do those things, but to make things even more complicated in this, this lack of clarity season, if your social media looks anything like mine, it's really bookended by two types of people and how they're responding to this. You know, one extreme is I was doing an errand with a buddy earlier this week. He owns a business, and he was telling me he had sent some emails out to some potential clients about some upcoming business that they had, and he told me one of his clients emailed him back, and I quote, "The world is ending. We will not be doing business together." Like, okay, that's one extreme. That's the other. But the other extreme of this is that, man, you know what? This is all a hoax. I'm not changing anything that I'm doing. Don't be so crazy. Get out and about, and if you see me, give me a high five and a hug. Just kidding. Someone who's like that never asks for a hug. But those are the extremes of people, and I know I don't fall into either one of those extremes, but I'm somewhere on that spectrum, and you are somewhere on that spectrum as well. But regardless of where you find yourself on that spectrum, you are faced with this question. We are faced with this question of what do we do now? What can we do now? What should we do now? And ultimately, each of us has to decide on our own, what that's going to be, especially when it comes to our personal individual tasks from day to day. But as followers of Jesus, right, if you call yourself a Christian, if you say, you know what, Jesus is calling the shots in my life, there are some things that do not change for us. Our ultimate goal is our mission here at Momentum. And our mission is that we want to move people forward, right? We can always be growing. We can always be getting better at loving God, loving people, and make disciples who make disciples, make students, help people become followers of Jesus who then go and help other people become followers of Jesus. And that mission may look different as far as how we go about that right now, but the mission stays the same. And so if you are joining us for the very first time this morning, this is your first time being at Momentum, or maybe you were checking Momentum out for a little while before all this broke, and now you've got to sign in and hang out with us online, or maybe you're just investigating Jesus and you clicked on this link because a friend posted it to their social media. I want to let you know you're in the right place. We're so glad that you're here this morning. And something that I want you to know is that God is not mad at you. God desperately wants to be in relationship with you. The bottom line is that God loves you and wants to forgive you. God demonstrated his own love by sending his son Jesus to die on the cross to pay our price of our sin so that we could be forgiven. And when we do that, right, when we begin to live out Jesus' teachings in our life, we can experience life as it was meant to, a life of hope in spite of our circumstances, that we can have hope even in the middle of things that we don't know right now. And hope that this life isn't all that there is. Hope because there is a God who does know what's next, and he loves us and wants to protect and walk through it with us. Now, for those who have claimed this life and hope through Jesus and being baptized and started a new life, there is something that I want to show you in the Bible this morning. And so for those of you who maybe you're not there yet, or you're listening in, you're investigating Jesus, I think this is really good for you to overhear. In the Bible, it shows us that when we are baptized, it symbolizes being buried with Christ and being raised in a new life, being dunked in water, and as a way of saying, hey, I'm done with this life, and now I'm starting a life of letting Jesus call the shots. It shows that the Bible shows that not only are we forgiven, but we are promised that God sends his Spirit to live inside of us. And I get it. That sounds wild. That sounds a little odd, and there is a lot about that I don't understand. But here is something that I do know, and here is something that I do understand about it, and it comes out of the book of 2 Timothy. And today, I don't want you to read this as something that's in the Bible. Today, I want you to read this as it was originally written. You see, originally, this wasn't written to be in the Bible. It wasn't a group of guys sitting around being like, oh, we need something else to put in the Bible today. What are you going to write about? No, originally, this was a letter. Originally, this was a letter written by a guy named Paul, who at one point in time in his life made it his mission to kill followers of Jesus. And then he meets Jesus and he totally flips and he becomes a follower of Jesus. And he goes around the known world at the time starting churches. And he meets a young man named Timothy. And Timothy begins to travel around with Paul in the known world starting churches. And these two become really good friends. These two become great buddies. And then later in life, Paul and Timothy find themselves separated from one another, isolated, quarantined. Paul is in prison in Rome under the Emperor Nero. And if you remember anything from your history classes, being a Christian under the Roman Emperor Nero was not a good thing. And being in prison meant that you wouldn't be in prison long before you were tortured and eventually executed. And with Paul being in prison under the Roman Emperor Nero, at the end of his life, sits down and pens a letter to this young man who became such a strong friend of Paul. And in the beginning of his letter, we find out Paul had been abandoned by all of his friends. And he writes to Timothy, and he says what we're getting ready to look at this morning, and it sets the tone for the rest of the letter. And Paul pens this to his young friend as he's facing his tortured and eventual execution. Paul writes this. He says, Timothy, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but one of power and love and self-discipline. And one of the things that I have heard it said, a way to kind of like sum it up for Christians, for followers of Jesus, is that Christians choose faith over fear. Christians choose to trust God over feeding their fears. There's a whole lot about what's going on with COVID-19 and in our world that we don't know right now. But something that I do know is that if you have Jesus, God has given you a spirit of power and love and a spirit of self-discipline. And sometimes, especially times like right now, I think we need to memorize verses like this. I think we need to hear verses like this over and over and over again. That when we're baptized and we become a follower of Jesus, we're given this spirit that is powerful and full of love and self-discipline. The word that Paul uses here in the original language that this letter was written in ancient times, this word is this Greek word, dunamis, which is ultimately where we get our English word dynamic. And if you were to go through and you were to look at all the different places where this word appears in the stories of Jesus and it appears in the Bible, what you're going to see is over and over and over, event after event after event after event, where followers of Jesus, where people who were trying to love God were facing a situation, right, where they were overwhelmed, where they had no idea what was next, they had no idea how they were going to make it through it, and God shows up and gives them the power that they need in order to make it through. He gives them power, He gives them encouragement, He gives them exactly what is needed in each unique and creative time for those who trust Him, and this time will be no different. I think that is what is unique about this situation is so often our human nature is to find power and encouragement and comfort by being in numbers, right? When a crisis like this hits, one of the things that gives us encouragement and comfort is to rally and to pull together and to just be together. I mean, it's just the way that we were created. God created us for relationships, to be with one another. my news feed on social media, it has been filled with people already just after a week or two who are talking about how much they miss their community, only after a couple days. And there has been on occasion, there's been memes like this one that has been shared, coronavirus spreads by social interaction, and introverts are like, I feel like I was made for this, or others like coronavirus spreads by social interaction, and introverts are like, I've been practicing for this my whole life, I've seen more than one version of this posted since this has all been going around. And here's the honest truth is I'm an introvert myself. I really enjoy quiet time by myself. I often get up in the wee hours of the morning because I just enjoy how still and how quiet, the house is before everyone gets hustling and bustling. And I've been in this season of my life where much of my time is spent alone, kind of preparing for these messages. And I enjoy being able to sit down and turn things on Do Not Disturb and focus in and read and study about things that God teaches us so that we can share and talk about them on Sunday morning. But lately, and this was before all this started to happen, one of the things that I was learning about, like in my counseling session, was that, I craved interactions with people. And I've just been missing that. And it's led to some things that I've really had to work through. And so the truth is there's truth, to this meme. But even introverts, right? Like as introverts, we look forward to isolated time by ourselves. But sooner or later, you are going to have a longing for connection. And there's a reason for that, because God created us that way. In the very first couple pages of the Bible, there's this pattern that develops. And one of the things, I want to take a break for a moment and let you know, if you have kids at home that are birthed through 5th grade, our Mo Kids ministry has just been killing it. The one who leads it at Twinsburg, Macedonia, her name is Lauren. And the one that leads it at our Garfield Heights campus, her name is Nicole. And they've just been crushing it at not only leading our kids and teaching them about God on Sunday mornings, but also handing out materials to parents and guardians so that when you go home, you can lead your kids well spiritually. And they are still doing that. They've been emailing out what they've been going through, and they've actually been learning about the creation account, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But if you've not been getting those emails and you've got kids at home, or this is your first time hanging out with us and you've not gotten those emails and you want some stuff to teach your kids about God, I want you, if you would typically go to our Twinsburg, Macedonia campus, email Lauren at MomentumChurch.com. And if you typically go to our Garfield Heights campus, email Nicole at MomentumChurch.com. And if you're not sure which one you would go to, just email one or the other. I was going to tell you to email whichever one had the shortest letters in their name, but it's the same. So maybe you can email them both and see which one responds the quickest. I don't know. But they're still sending out materials that you can print out or read off your phone so that you can teach and lead your kids spiritually. And one of the things that they're doing right now with one of the age groups of kids is they're going through the creation account. And there's this pattern that develops in the first few pages of the Bible. God creates something and he steps back and he looks at it and sees that it's good. First day he creates light, steps back, sees that it's good. Then he creates the sky and he steps back and he sees that it's good. And then ground and vegetation, he steps back, sees that it's good. And stars, sees that it's good. And then sea animals, sees that it's good. Land animals, sees that it's good. And then he creates man, a man that the Bible names Adam. And he steps back, and for the first time he looks at it. And he says this in Genesis 2:18, he says, "Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." And in this moment, God creates humankind for us because we were meant to be together. We are not meant to be isolated. We're not meant to be alone. And so here's where the rub of this situation that we're facing with COVID-19 is we draw power, right, by being together, by being connected to one another, not being isolated. Yet, in order for us to beat this, we have to isolate. We have to socially distance ourselves from one another. And that's why I want to remind you of this verse today where God tells us he's not given us a spirit of fear. He's not given us a spirit of timidity, but one of power and love and self-discipline. power, where he supplies the strength we need to get through whatever time it is that we are facing. And he gives us a spirit of love. Now, probably one of the most popular passages in the Bible is what's called the love chapter in the Bible. It's 1 Corinthians 13. And it's read in almost every single wedding ceremony that you would go to or that I've been a part of as a minister. And it typically goes, love is patient, love is kind. And I've kind of paraphrased it and kind of changed it to my own to mean what it means to us. And so I would read it like this: love is patient, love isn't pushy, love will loan someone else their strength in their moments of weakness. Love will push down the me monster inside to try and help the other person shine. Love always protects by doing everything it can to keep bad things out. Love's default mode is to trust and to never, ever give up. Now, what's interesting is this is often read in the context of marriage, in wedding ceremonies, but when you look at the context of the verses in 1 Corinthians where it is written, it's actually talking about people. It's talking about the church. It's talking about us. And really what Paul, who actually writes 1 Corinthians as well, what Paul is trying to say and about how we talk about people, that love, simply put, defers. Love says, not what I need, what do you need? What do you need me to do in this moment? You see, a spirit of love will cause you to do the extra. It will cause you to go out of your way to care for and protect the person next to you right now in your home, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, on your city, or on your street. Love is saying, I'll send that text to check in even though I don't really want to right now. Love is saying, I'll go get groceries for my neighbor who may be immunocompromised for whatever reason. You know what? Love may be for you. You know what? I'll finally drop my pride and my bravado about this whole thing so that I don't actually unintentionally hurt someone else's loved one because I just continue going about my daily life. So what do we do with our spirit of love? Well, when we get to hang out as Momentum, we say the heart of Momentum is our Mo groups. Our Mo groups are 6 to 12 people that meet in someone's home on a night throughout the week. And typically our groups are around 12 people. And one of the problems we run into is that puts us over the amount that just wouldn't be wise for us to get together face to face. And so many of our groups, if not all of our groups, have moved to digital groups right now. And now it is so important that we connect and find ways to be with one another and check in on one another. And so we have been working feverishly at Momentum to try and figure out how we can do this in a way that is wise, in a way that is caring. Thank God for technology, that we can still be together even though we can't physically be together. And so what I really want to encourage you to do, if you've not connected with a Mo group before, if you've not physically been to one, there is no better time than right now to get connected to a digital Mo group, to give it a shot, to try, so that you can have someone checking in on you, so that you can be checking in on others, so that you can love God and love people with the things that you can do right now. There's one of the best things that you could do is you could go to this link right here. You can go to momentumchurch.com/groups. And on there, you will find all of our different Mo groups. And you could go, and if you're interested in being a part of this online community, right, where we move each other forward spiritually and where we learn how to care for one another, you can go to this group and you'll see all of our groups and all the different leaders, and you can send them an email. Many of our groups are on spring break this week, so they may not be meeting digitally, but there's no reason why you can't send them an email now and say, man, I would really love to get to be a part of this the next time that you guys meet. Let's do that. Let's still make it intentional to connect with one another. And the last part of the spirit that God gives us that's talked about in 2 Timothy is Paul tells Timothy, God has given you a spirit of power. He's given you one that's full of love. And he has given you a spirit of self-discipline. Let's be honest, right? Self-discipline is not one of those things that we really like, right? Or self-control, right? We all want to be able to do what we want, when we want, and to follow our feelings and not pay the price as a result of doing those things. But we have learned We have learned that there's oftentimes consequences to us just giving in to doing what we want to do, and so we've learned to exercise self-control. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to do during this season. It reminds me of this story that just happened about the end of February of this year. A lady named Kaylee Wilkes went viral, ready, for caring for a plant, for caring for a succulent plant. This is the plant. This is the picture of Carrie and the plant that she'd been caring for, the succulent. And in the post that went viral, Carrie states how proud she was, or how proud she is of this plant because she had successfully cared for it for about 2 years. She had cared for it for about 2 years, and the reason why it was a big deal is because she has tried to do this several times in the past, and she'd accidentally killed very similar plants and other types of plants in the past. So she'd never been successful before. But this time, she was given this plant from a friend as a gift. And so Carrie decided, you know what? This time's going to be different. This time, I'm going to make sure that I care for this thing. So she went to Google, and she researched about succulent plants, and she developed a watering plan based off of what she had learned and how big the plant was and what size pot it was in and the food that it needed and so on. And so she developed this watering plan, and she followed it strictly. So strictly that anytime someone offered to help, she refused their help because she was afraid that they would either overwater it or underwater it. That's how detailed she got into this. And it really seemed to pay off because the plant, look at it, always seemed to look amazing. She talked about how she used to go and she would wash the leaves, making sure that it looked so good. And so about 6 months in, she was rejuvenated by the success of her first plant. And so she went out and she started accumulating other plants. And she would go and she would do the same thing. She would Google about them. She would learn about them, what pot they needed, what food they needed, how much water. And then in late February of this year, about 2 years in, she decided that it was time for her to repot her original succulent plant. And so she went and she got her new plant. And the post that caused this whole thing to go viral was when she pulled the plant out, she realized it's a fake plant. They had glued sand to the top of the styrofoam. There were no roots, and it was just foam on the bottom of the ears. She had watered and fed this thing for 2 years and had no idea that it was a faked plant. She said in the post that the discovery she made was both heartbreaking and oh so funny. She was able to really laugh at herself. Now, she has now kept several real plants alive. And as for this fake one, if you're wondering what she decided to do, she said in the post, well, I'm going to replant it anyway because I'm not going to give up on it now. And so she has replanted it, and she plans to write a children's book about it. And that's funny and everything. But guys, here's the reality of what happened there. Right, she had tried before to keep plants alive, and she always would forget to water. She never spent the time to really learn about the plants or know what it needed. But this time around, it was going to be different. And she decided that it was different. And so she decided that she was going to be disciplined and learn and do what she needed to do. And because of that, she developed the self-discipline needed to care for the other real plants. And she's kept them alive, and she now loves these plants. Here's the reality, and this is where it meets home, is this is definitely a different time for us. We are doing more things now in a different way than we have ever done before. And as Momentum, as a church, we aren't going to quit. Our mission is too big, and we have been given a spirit of power. God's going to give us what we need when we need it. We're not going to stop caring. We're not going to stop showing up and learning and sacrificing to care for one another because He's given us a spirit of love. But don't let this be something that you do for a couple weeks and then you just let fall by the wayside, making this coming together as a church a priority. Because the spirit inside of you is not only one of power, not only one of love, but also of self-discipline. And we need each other. The writer of Hebrews says it this way. He says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to love and good deeds. Let us think of ways. Let's get creative. Hey, this isn't too big of a problem for us. We can figure this out. Let's be creative on how we're going to care for one another. And then it goes on and says this. It says, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now as the day of his return is drawing near, but let us not neglect getting together with one another, especially now. Last week, Dan, our lead minister, he challenged us, to try 5 or to gave the 6-week challenge, saying as much as it depends on you, commit to logging in, watching, and worshiping in your home from now on. You can't catch us live. Watch the replay during the week. And then when we are able to get together face to face, same thing. Say, you know what, I'm going to commit for 6 weeks. This week, start exercising that self-discipline muscle by going to that link and doing it right now before the sermon's even over. I can't tell what you're doing if you're not paying attention. Go to a new tab, email the leader, and say, man, I'm interested in being part of this group. Man, start a daily reading plan in the Bible now. Get in God's Word, even if it's just 3 sentences a day. I would encourage you to start in the book of Mark in the Bible that tells the story of Jesus' life. Although things may have to be digital right now with how we connect, I believe that you are going to find, much like the lady with the succulent plant, if you work on developing self-discipline right now to care for yourself, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and being a part of helping each other win right now, you're going to find that you're going to be able to have the self-discipline and keep that going so that we can keep helping each other win when this is all over. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray, and we're going to have 2 baptisms that we're going to celebrate together because our mission doesn't stop. Right? These building doors are going to stay open, and we're going to celebrate cool things that God is doing in our lives, in his people's lives. He is still working, and lives are still changing. And so if you're ready to get baptized, what I want to do is I want to encourage you to fill out that Connect card and say on there, hey, I want to know more information about following Jesus. Because God gave us a spirit of power and love and self-discipline so that we could love him, love people, and make disciples who make disciples. And although we may not know what tomorrow will bring, we know that Jesus